So thank you for coming, and welcome to the New York BizLab Clarkson Entrepreneurship Lunchtime series. In this series, we try to bring you interesting people, interesting entrepreneurs, and interesting folks who have had an impact in the regional community and in some cases, the world. So we're fortunate enough today that we're going to have another person like that, so we're really looking forward to that. I'm Buell, and I'm the David B. Ray Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Clarkson. And along with Rick DeRico and I, we've pulled this event together, and we're having a lot of fun doing it, and we keep doing it. We started this about over a year ago, if I remember, and we're still having fun. We're in 2 years ago?
April will be our 2 years.
April will be 2 years. Time flies when you're 65.
Or 51.
So, Clarkson is a sponsor of this event, and actually they've committed to sponsor this event through the end of this year, so that's good news. And for those of you who might think, well, Clarkson's up in Potsdam. Well, it turns out we have a campus right here in Schenectady, where we offer MBAs in both management and in healthcare, as well as master's degrees in engineering, a master's degree in teaching, and a certificate in bioethics. So if that's something you're interested in, it's a good place to go. I also want to let you know that myself and a colleague a number of months ago started a podcast. It's called The Unconventional Path, and it's about entrepreneurship and innovation stories. As a matter of fact, many people who have spoken here in the past have been guests on that podcast. Nicole Snow is one of them. Her podcast hit, I think, several weeks ago. One of our big sellers. They're all free, by the way, so selling is sort of a different word there. And this past week, we just did episode 20, and it was Tyler Wrightson, who was also a speaker here. So if you missed either Nicole's talk or Tyler's talk, you can catch their stories on the podcast. And again, it's called The Unconventional Path. It's available on all your favorite podcasting apps. This is the second event of this year. And just like the previous one, it is sold out. As you can see, the room is full. And at some point in time, we're going to need a bigger room, right?
You're not going to like it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, or we need tighter seating or something. But so I think that's really great. So this is actually our 19th event, but it's our 20th speaker. So the first person who can explain that phenomena and explains that phenomenon to Rick, so don't shout it out here, but the first person to see Rick who understands how this is our 19th event, but our 20th speaker, we have a little free gift for you. So first one, and the winner of the gift is solely at Rick's discretion. No recounts, none of that stuff. So whatever he says goes. But it's the first person who knows the answer to that question, explains it to Rick, gets a nice little gift. As a matter of fact, when we show the gift, it incentivizes you. It's commemorative, right? All speakers, you have to be a speaker to get one of these. So if you can explain the 1920 discrepancy, you can get one of these. All right. Today's format's going to be an interview. As you know, sometimes the formats are a PowerPoint presentation or just a speech, I'll call it. Today we're going to do an interview. We've done several of these, and I think they've done really well. So Rick will be interviewing today's guest, who is Jeff Buell. And that's really going to be a good one, I'm sure. So a couple of things I got to work through here. There's a bank across the wall here, and so you might hear some noises. That's a good thing. That means they're doing business. They're doing business in downtown Schenectady. That's a good thing. So just want to make you aware of that. Restrooms are past the exit signs over there. We have exits in the back. We have exits down both of these hallways on the side. And if you're tweeting, please use the hashtag BizLab Clarkson. We love people tweeting this out. This week we have special thanks to a videographer. We have a camera in the back. We're going to video this talk. So that's Richard Lynn and Jack Carpenter of Agora Technologies, and they're doing that today for us. So that's very nice. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tony Civitello, who is the president and CEO of TransFinder, and the person who owns this building. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's right. So we want to be really nice to him. And TransFinder is, of course, one of the top companies that does school bus routing software, and they're just across the street up the road. And he's been a founder and a president of companies, and he's a really smart guy. So, Tony, I'm going to say a few words.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you for committing the rest of the year for these great events. And I can't wait to hear about what's going on. We see you're all over the news. You're really getting a lot of the highlights. So I'm excited. But I just want to say something about economic development. And each one of you clearly are engaged, are excited, are passionate to make sure that this area is growing economically. And we want to make sure that we create jobs. Don't get confused on all the crazy noise that's going on in the past couple weeks. Because that doesn't necessarily mean that's what we're thinking about. We care what you're doing. You're investing a lot of money in Schenectady and, of course, other parts of the capital region. That's important. That creates jobs. It's all those good things. I'm excited. When I thought about the BizLab about 5 years ago at this point, I want to create an environment that we help startup companies stay here, remain here, and who knows, maybe then you don't need a block to be built by you. Or, create new ideas. And that's what we want. So I just want to make sure, I'm not going to be political, right? But I just want to make sure, maybe there's just a little bit of one-off what's been going on the past couple weeks. But I think we all know, at least in this room, you showed up here today because you want to see what's going on in economic development. And these people, all of us get credit, really. And some maybe get more credit than others. I just want to take the opportunity and say thank you again for Clarkson to make a commitment here. And you guys are completely show to us all the time that you're interested and you're excited, and all the speakers and all the events, and clearly you want the economy in this area to just continue to grow. So that gets me more excited that you want it. It really passed my expectation of the BizLab. So I just want to tell you thank you. But now our person's going to be doing an interview. The man, the one and only, the good-looking, always well-dressed, well-mannered.
Well, you keep helping me now when I
Rico.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much for coming. I also have an app called Worthwhile Words. Sorry, Bela. Worthwhile Words. You've been on it, Nicole, right? You rocked, right? You're good. Anyway, please welcome Jeff Buell. Give him up. Give it a hand to Jeff. We have a lot to cover, but I want to tell you right up front.
Wait, you didn't call me well-mannered and well-dressed.
Well-mannered and well-mannered. Just kidding. And well-dressed.
That was good.
Hey, so here's the thing. We like to open these things up early, okay? So I don't want you to have to wait 40 minutes to have a question that hopefully I'll remember that question because I want to ask it later. So I'll be looking up. I got a lot of questions here I want to go through. I'll get grease the skids, and then I'll be looking up. So please be ready, and I'll look at you and point to you, all right? And you have your microphone. Is it on?
Yes, sir.
Good? All right. So for starters, I just want to say, this is some headlines. This is like ripped from the headlines from Jeff Buell. One headline, man, they didn't even use your name. Just man. This is a couple years ago, though, so maybe they would have changed it now. But man gave out $100 for 365 days in memory of his sister. Anyone remember reading that story? I'm going to talk a little bit about that. It is worth, this is that man. 20 things you didn't know about me. Jeff Buell. Now, hopefully you didn't watch that, read that, because we'll touch on some of those things here. But that was just February 4th. Redburn Development Partners buys more property in downtown Albany. That was just February 5th. Jeff Buell sells 2 downtown Troy buildings for $3.2 million. By the way, he bought them for $360,000, not bad. He did invest $2 million though. And he sold them to a buyer from San Francisco. Artisan Incubator to open in downtown Schenectady, and many, many more headlines. So my first question to you is just what motivates you? What's the drive behind these headlines?
Yeah, it's certainly not the headlines. I think you should always read your headlines, but not believe them. So I've gotten pretty good at that. I don't know what motivates me. I used to say that it was a fear of failure, and then I just think that that's so ridiculous. What actually motivates me is I just want to see, everybody be a little happier. And I think that if we could all be a little happier, everything else would kind of fall into place. You're not going to get any, just as a warning, you won't be getting any, I need a 7.2% return on my investment today. Not really my thing. I'm definitely more in the happy-go-lucky, let's believe in each other, and then, I can marry.
Kumbaya, little
Yeah,
kumbaya.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, definitely kumbaya. And
We can hold hands later.
And then how do we marry up the business end of it and make it work?
Exactly.
So from my perspective, the motivation is I'm really blessed to be able to get up every morning and have no idea what my day is going to look like.
That's awesome.
I had this on my schedule, and I don't know what the rest of today looks like.
Me either.
Oh,
So,
good.
all right, that's good. No, I'm just kidding, Tony. I'm going to be doing lots of TransFinder stuff. But, all right. So can you give us a little bit, set the table for us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, how you grew. I know you grew up, he lives in Troy, lives in Schenectady now, right behind us, actually, in the Stockade area. He grew up in Troy, very regional guy. So tell me a little bit about your home life, growing up, and then just kind of what inspired you to do what you're doing now.
So I grew up decidedly lower middle class in Troy. Spent the majority of my life there. I went to school at St. Rose, so I've always been local. And after school, I lived in like 12 different apartments in downtown Troy over the course of 12 years. I'm one that needs to be moving, literally and figuratively. So I spent most of my time in downtown Troy, and then obviously moved to Schenectady a couple of years ago. And
Schenectady's better. I know that you don't like to put cities against each other, but Schenectady is,
I think,
compared to-
so let's just start there. I have a very vivid memory of, I was the economic development coordinator for Troy before Troy was cool. And, was attempting to drive activity there. And I vividly remember an article in the Times-Union where I said something to the effect of, everything works in Troy because it's people doing blood, sweat, and tears in their business. And in Schenectady, Metroplex just hands everybody money.
Is Ray Gillen here? Good,
He's not
okay,
here,
good.
but he definitely remembers the quote and throws it in my face as much as he can.
We're live streaming this on Facebook, by the way, so Ray, it's just,
But I'm so disappointed in that person who said that because I was incredibly short-sighted and had this concept that Troy could compete against Schenectady and Albany without any working together, and that some success would come of that. And it's such nonsense. And I was 25 at the time, so I didn't know what I didn't know. But so I don't think that any one of them is better. I've invested the majority of my adult life into the city of Troy. We will soon be over $25 million of investment in downtown Schenectady. And by the end of 2021, we'll have invested at least $80 million in downtown Albany, which was like really low on my list of cool places to be for a very long time. Big disparager of Albany, and now I'm the biggest hypocrite you can imagine saying, everyone come to downtown Albany. Schenectady's better in its own way, and Troy's better in its own way, and Albany's better in its own way, and I think
that sounds kind of like a song. Everything is beautiful in its own way.
but it's so true. It's Troy has this incredible walkability and this quaint downtown with historic buildings, and we've had them and they look great. And here I live at the corner of Lafayette and State Street, and I can walk to an actual casino in 20 minutes, and I can go to Proctor's, and I can go to a movie theater, and like 40 restaurants, right? Yeah. It's a bigger city life, and Albany has 65,000 people that commute into downtown to work every day. That's a real, actual city, people. And I think that even place we've developed property in Hoosick Falls, which has like 14 people, but they're a fun 14 people. So it's an emerging thing for me, this idea of regionalization. I have to wear that hypocrite badge because I did try to pit communities against each other for the betterment of myself at the time, and I'm now thinking that that's just completely ridiculous.
One important question, and I want to get back to the regionalization. Favorite restaurant in Schenectady?
Oh man, this week?
Oh, okay.
It's literally impossible to answer, but Liza's, Slide and Dirty were both my tenants.
Nice.
Love Daly's, Mexican Radio, Aperitivo. I love everything. 151. Okay. You can't go wrong.
Yeah, you're right. You can't go wrong. All right. You didn't mention Saratoga Springs in your list.
Yeah.
And Okay,
See that?
could you explain?
It's perfect. It's too. I have a hard time enjoying places where there's no need for me. I'm gonna own it. So there's a little bit of that old me that just popped out, right? Saratoga's incredible. What a success story. It's the upstate New York success story. If it was larger, you would be hearing about it along the same lines of an Austin, Texas, or Denver, Colorado, or a Minneapolis, Minnesota, right? These places that are just thriving urban areas that once weren't. And Saratoga is very much like that, but for the smaller scale. So I think from our perspective as a development company, we're not going to go to Saratoga. There's incredible people that work there, and our development mission isn't based only on how much money can we make, and not the people that are there working there, that's what they're driven by, but to work in Saratoga, it has to be your paramount focus at this point. And so we'll continue working in poor, struggling areas and trying to create some vibrancy to see what happens.
I'm sure there are some people in Saratoga who are happy to hear you say that anyway. The developers.
Yeah.
And I won't mention their initials, Sonny Bonaccio. So before I go to the next, some of my questions, is there a question in the audience? There's not a question in the audience.
Keep going.
Wow, all right, I will.
I'm not saying anything important yet.
Do you have by the way, any headlines you want to announce for us here? Any news? I always tell people that we break news here a lot of times.
So we're making an $10.5 million investment in downtown Schenectady in the Stockade District. We're buying 22-ish historic buildings that are already actually rehabbed and doing well, and we think that we can be a great steward for them and provide some professional management and increase their value over the next couple of years. So that's
awesome.
That's something we haven't really done yet. We're buying cash flow, but that's important too.
Right, awesome. Okay, Mike DeSocio, you got that? So, from the Business Review, so make sure you saw that. All right, you described the region as having this is when we were having a conversation in advance, Bail and I and you, that the region has the equivalent of a sixth grader's self-esteem problem. So what do you mean by that?
In my less kind words, I would say that if you removed all of the people from the capital region and just plopped down the infrastructure that we have here, it would be one of the most incredible places in the world. I mean, we're an hour from the Adirondacks and the 6 million acres of that beauty. We're 3 hours from New York, 4 hours from Buffalo, 2.5 from Boston.
People always make fun of that, though. They always say that's saying the easiest way to get out of the capital region. We can get to Boston, we can get to New York.
Because they have the self-esteem problem of a sixth grader.
Did I just fall into a trap?
Yeah, I mean, you just proved the point. Like, the biggest problem we have in overcoming the deficiencies in this area are the people that are in this area. They're so negative, and I don't want to beat them up because a lot of them are negative because of the generational impact that they've had. There's been a disinvestment in this area for the last 70 years. I can see, I look at pictures in downtown Schenectady and downtown Troy from the 1950s, and it was a booming metropolis. We were incredible. In 1890, I know it's 120 years ago, 130 years ago, Troy was the third wealthiest city in the entire country.
Or Silicon Valley.
There's a reason that this place is here to begin with, and it was because it had incredible assets. Those incredible assets haven't gone away. The weather has always been the weather here. It didn't suddenly just get terrible. Taxes are high everywhere. No one wants to pay taxes. But the difference between paying taxes of $10,000 and $11,000, it's less than $1,000 if you go into the figurative sense of it. None of that matters. What matters here is if you bring somebody in here from the outside, and you give me a half an hour to tour them through downtown Troy and downtown Schenectady and downtown Albany, they will love it by the time I'm done my 30-minute pitch.
Right.
And then if you tell them to go to the bar and hang out with somebody who's lived here their whole life, they will sprint away from this place.
Well, it's funny because I don't know if those of you remember Mike Marvin, who used to be CEO of MapInfo. Remember Mike? Do you know the name Mike Marvin?
Nope.
So, okay, so you know the name MapInfo?
Yes.
Okay. So when he used to recruit people from outside of the area, he would not let them actually interact with any locals that were working for MapInfo. It had to be all the out-of-towners because they were the ones that were the biggest cheerleaders for the region.
I mean, I was having a great conversation with the Alliance for the Creative Economy a couple weeks ago. We were talking about this branding effort. You know, I love what the name Tech Valley has brought to the area, but if we think we're going to market ourselves as Tech Valley to millennials and Generation Z and the people behind them, we're incredibly wrong. And you know, we're talking about how do we pitch this as a place. And I said, it's really easy for me to go to Tony and to go to the hospitals and go to the universities and convince them that, hey, here's this really great idea I had. We're going to market ourselves as a big small city or major metro mini market. I screwed it up. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
But you know, we have all these concepts that we can do that we can make relevant in this area, and I can get all of the people that are up at the top to buy in because they're all believers in this area that it can become something. And if I go down 2 floors from where they are and meet all of their employees and say I'm going to do the exact same thing, I will get 0 buy-in. And that is something that needs to change rapidly. And when I say rapidly, I sometimes get a little sad at these things because I can get people to buy in by the end. I know who's leaning in, who's interested, who's smiling. And then you have to say, like, this is going to take 50 or 60 years. Like, it took 70 years to ruin it. It's going to take at least 50 or 60 to fix it.
Yeah.
And so, all right, I probably won't see it. Great. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't plant the tree today.
And you were mentioning grandchildren in our conversation.
Yeah, my grandchildren, right. If I don't even have a child. So theoretically, if I one day had a grandchild, they might see it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So the 6th grade thing is, you know, you can have, I was a 6th grader with no self-esteem. I was a 30-year-old with no self-esteem. I'm just starting to figure this self-esteem thing out. You know, like the 6th grader, they understand who they are. They understand where they're living, but then they look in the mirror and they have all these doubts. And we have such doubt as a region that I feel like if one person a day could just jump on the bandwagon of saying, man, I love it here. And I didn't always love it here.
Right.
I love it here and here's why. And just speak goodness into the world instead of negativity. It's the only way to change it. And there's no way to put it on a chart and see how long it happens.
Part of it is also seeing it. Like, you live in these cities, you've driven, when people come to Schenectady, I invite them to come, we invite them to Transponder to come, and then they go, oh, I didn't realize how much was happening here. So they still have a perception that's a misperception, really.
Huge perception.
At this stage.
Yeah, my parents come over here, I don't know. I probably went to Schenectady twice in my entire life before I was 25 years old. Twice.
Right.
I grew up 20 minutes away.
Right. Well, it's across the river.
It's across the river, though.
You got the river.
You got to watch out for that river. Like, we didn't build
It's like the
bridges
Berlin
100
Wall.
years ago.
Any questions? Yes, right here, Steve LaBelle.
Tell me your view of how arts and culture plays into
The role that arts and culture plays into
the growth.
Everything we're talking about.
growth. Okay.
So for me, it would be number 1 on the list.
Thank you.
I think that since the Industrial Revolution, our cities have been job centers and people clustered around the jobs, and that's what they grew. That's how cities grew. They grew because of the jobs. And I think that there's a shift happening. It's anecdotal. I'm sure there's other people that think the same thing. I'm sure there's people that think the exact opposite. Who knows who's right? But in my head, cities are going to transform from job centers to living centers. And where we are investing is in places like downtown Albany is great for me, a great example. We bought, I don't know how many buildings. It was a lot of buildings. It's 450,000 square feet of vacant properties. We can curate that to look like however we want to look like. And so we're chasing uses that people would not chase, that can't pay as much money, because we believe in creating the vibrancy that we need down there. So do I need a job to live in downtown Albany, or will I go live in downtown Albany, Schenectady, Troy, put them all together? Will I go live down there because I'm rethinking the way the world works, especially from a work standpoint? Millennials don't care about their job. I think there's something like they'll switch jobs like 15 times in their life, whereas my parents' generation, it was 3 to 4. It's a completely different world that we're growing up in. And we're all still growing up, right? Nobody ever stops growing up. So if we can make it so that cities are vibrant places to live and work and play, and that's so cliche, but so very true, then we don't really have to worry about the jobs, because good companies, you know this, good companies need good people. You'll go where the good people are. So if we can change communities to make them more livable and more attractive, and it's easy right now. We have hundreds of apartments and they're all full. Great, they're all between 20 and 40 years old. That's the easy part. Backfilling it so that they wouldn't get married and have families and don't move to Niskayuna. Or I'm literally looking at everybody on my team back there and all the suburbs that they live in, except for me. How do we do that? So arts and culture, absolutely the number 1 thing. We should be having events in the street every weekend. The reason that Troy boomed so well is because the farmers market became not only a capital district attraction, it became a Northeast attraction, and people in New York City know about the Troy Farmers Market. That's why Troy boomed.
Before I forget, can the Redburn crowd, you guys want to stand up or make some noise back there? There's a bunch of you. How many people on your team?
I don't know, like 10.
13, something like that?
Yeah.
Hey. So I want you to be my fact checker. So I'm going to ask him some personal questions later, and if there's anything that's discrepancy, you can feel free, I'll give you the mic.
I am a walking discrepancy.
So to give me a little bit of I'll get you one sec. Thank you. How do projects, so you talked about the Albany project, for instance, how do projects cross your path? And then, give me a little bit of the thinking and the philosophy when you're considering a project.
The first building that I ever developed, I actually had a dream at night, and I was like, I could buy that building and then buy all the other buildings around it and turn it into a pedestrian street. It'll be amazing. And I don't know, I went down and had a conversation with Liz and said, here's my great idea. And then I actually ended up buying that building and the ones across the street. Never got it to turn into a pedestrian street because I started getting cranky about Troy and left.
Is he cranky? Is that true?
Oh man.
I'm fact checking in real time.
The chair of the IDA was eating lunch next to me and I was only complaining about the city of Troy for a half an hour.
So do you have dreams for all your projects?
No.
Okay.
So I think that's how it started, but now the great thing about success is that if you're crazy like I am and you have some success, you end up going from crazy to eccentric, and people can deal with eccentric. They're like, oh, he's just a little bit off, that's okay. Now I think we've gained a reputation as the people who are willing to develop just about anything. And that doesn't mean that we don't have standards, but what we're looking for is so much different. We are a very different development team. We look at things incredibly different than most people. So now we have the benefit of people bring us stuff.
Right.
And we're looking at a project in Utica that we wouldn't have done ever, but it was brought to us, and that looks like fun. So
You got to be disciplined a little bit too, right?
Well, so the merged company, for those of you who don't know, I own my own development company. We merged last year with Redburn Development.
Is that sequential?
Sequence.
Sequence.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
but the merger was sequential, so that
Sequential.
works.
Thank you. Thanks for covering me on that. That's what I meant.
We have three principals who also view the world very differently, and we're careful about writing our operating agreement so that we all had to be unanimous on decisions. So the discipline is inherently there. We all have to agree to go do something, and so it has to make sense on my wishy-washy, I want the world to be good way, and then the engineers, the numbers need to make sense way.
Excellent. There was a question back here.
Yeah, to circle back just for a second, I run an arts-based business in downtown Schenectady, and I want to get the X factor that exists in you. You did stick in Troy, saying it's impossible to go across the river. And I'm fighting that all the time. It's a 10-minute drive for God's sakes, but well, we don't go over it just yet. So, and developing this region, I think this is a really critical question.
Yeah.
To become one region. You're different in the way you look at investment, clearly. What makes you different in the way you look at the region? What happened?
I don't know. That's a really great question, because I remember having conversations when I was in my mid-20s where I would just be like, I'm moving to Tampa, and I hate it here, and I'm miserable, and I don't know why the switch flipped. I do know that in our development operations that we are trying to force feed regionalization down people's throats. Opened up a Slide and Dirty in Troy and then opened up a Slide and Dirty in Schenectady. And people get cranky about that because they're, that's Troy's Slide and Dirty, you shouldn't be able to do that. And, it's like, well, that's just insane, because I look at the region as, if we're 1 million people strong, if you created a 1 million person metropolitan area, there only wouldn't be one of everything. I look at Schenectady and Troy and Albany as neighborhoods now, and inside there are also neighborhoods inside of those cities, but it's our parochialism that's killing us, right? I mean, I don't want to, there's no politicians here, right?
I don't think so. Well, there's one.
I mean, I don't want to sound like the governor either, but we have so many levels of government, good Lord. And, at some point we have to be able to get over that. We've had good success in businesses crossing the lines. Nicole's here from Bluebird, and just the response from being in her store before she closed in Troy, and people saying, well, I can't believe you're moving to Schenectady. I'm never going over there. To Then she opened and now people are coming over and they're like, I didn't know so much was happening in Schenectady. So if we can kind of force ourselves, if you're someone in this room that feels like you're trapped in a place, you don't need to. Like I could take your Schenectady-based arts business and open up another one in downtown Albany. And then
You're going in the wrong direction, Jeff. Schenectady, stay in Schenectady.
See, Rick, you have to stop this.
I can't help it. I can't help it.
Because, look, if Schenectady just tries to fight for Schenectady and Troy for Troy and Albany for Albany, we are going to die. It will not work. People...
You're right. I'm just teasing.
1% growth isn't good. We shouldn't cheer ourselves because we had 1% growth. Bradenton last year had 14% growth. Right. Denver was 11. Let's shoot for those numbers.
Hey, part of the reason is because we are an old community. So we have, it was a
That's
full wagon.
also a benefit.
No, I mean, that's why there's all these different government entities.
Well, I know that, but I know why there's government. I just also don't know why there's government.
Well, I agree with you. We are in total agreement on that. So you told me that, you told the group actually here that you're an open book.
Yeah.
And you said in our interview earlier that when Bayla and I talked to you, that you might actually enjoy your failures. I don't know if this is possible. The skeptic reporter in me is still there, but you might enjoy your failures more than your successes. So in that vein, can you kind of share a failure? Is there missed opportunities or, and then there's probably a lesson learned out of those as well. So maybe if there's a failure /
Well, so I thought about that after I said it to you because you were so caught off guard. And then I realized I wasn't lying to myself. I actually do enjoy my failures more than my successes. Part of that is I'm just terrible at celebrating success, right? So like I won't allow myself to be overly happy with something that's happening.
Really?
So that's a personal thing. But also the benefits of failure are so incredible. If you fall flat on your face and have the wherewithal to get up, you get the opportunity of understanding who stayed near you, who was supportive of you.
Good.
What did you learn from that lesson? When it was just sequence development and it was a 3-person operation, sorry, Liz, we were minutes from failure. No idea how we were going to make payroll 3 weeks out. Liz was interviewing to become the director of the Rensselaer County Chamber, which they made a huge mistake in not hiring her. It was, what am I going to do? I have failed. I'm going down. This was less than 4 years ago. And that was a moment in time where you get to stop and focus and say, I don't want to fail. How am I going to get out of this? And, in a series of 4 or 5 really good moves that worked, we went from failure to, success. And everything is fantastic. So those failures allow you to remain humble, right? I'm the king of self-deprecating humor, but it's a way of keeping myself in check, because if I start to believe the headlines, then I'll stop focusing and I'll stop working, and then everything will collapse. And that's human history. Just look at how people collapse and how it all fails.
Yep.
If you don't keep yourself in check. So for me, constantly going back and looking at those failures and not focusing on them to the point of obsession,
Right.
but just what did you learn and what can you take from it? And I have these conversations all the time of, man, I was in it today and here's what I remembered, and wow.
Is there one that stands out to you though, that really sticks in your craw?
The one that frustrates me is Monument Square in Troy, mostly because I was working for the mayor when we decided to knock the building down in the first place, so my fault. And then now it's a giant hole, and I had the best idea, right? I'm not a big I guy. I love to say we more than I, but I had the best idea there and had the money and had the partners and had man, it was going to be an awesome project. And now there's a giant hole in the ground that I honestly don't think will ever get filled until they put a park there. Sorry, Heidi. And that's like because I let it get to me too. I let the people who were, I let the people who pretended they were in it for the right reason, and I knew they were in it for their own financial gain, get to me and kind of like made me run away from something I was passionate about. So I think if I'm looking from a professional standpoint, that would be...
That's a lesson learned. And now who the Jeff today and the Jeff of then, you're...
Yeah, I'd love to go develop Monument Square, but I would build a public park there and try to build up, an infrastructure of arts and culture that we could build something around, because you don't need more apartments in downtown Troy, you need more people.
I think Steve will talk to you later about maybe making that happen. Another headline here. Any questions? Okay, we'll go over here real quick.
Briefly, what's out of the area, can you tell us about the Utica project you mentioned?
It's just a downtown building. I don't want to go any farther than that at the point.
There's another hand up over here I saw. Go ahead, Mark.
I just example of a business owner and a politician, if you look at upstate markets, Erie has one major town in the Buffalo area, and we don't.
Yeah.
That's where the nature of the parochialism.
Yeah.
The politicians fight each other. And how can businesses get them to change? Because they're concerned about ownership. And by the way, businesses give a lot of money to politicians. So they need to speak to them and say, we will benefit more.
Everyone hear the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, yeah, I mean, so we just received $6 million award from New York State to do our downtown Albany project, right? And this is New York, it's pay to play. Never donated a dime to Governor Cuomo. I'm not saying it's like that I'm not saying that it's not, those situations don't exist, but I think that the best thing that we can do is just tell our story, put our heads down, try to accomplish something. And I think the one benefit that we've had is that I'm a very good storyteller. And so I can go into an office and say, here's why you need to give me $6 million because I'm going to convince 500 millennials to spend $6 million in disposable income over the next year. Oh, I don't even know if it's true. But we're going to try to do that. And so I think that from my perspective, I'm trying not to say ignore the politicians, but I'm really saying ignore the politics. Everything here is so hyper-political. I worked in Troy politics for 6 years, and it was an absolute blood sport to the point where you would just get excited playing the game and didn't even realize what it was doing to me and dragging me down emotionally and making me such a negative, awful person. I hated that guy. And it was all politics that was driving it. And so we play the game really well by saying, here's what we're going to bring to your community. I think if we could rally everyone to just, I don't have easy answers because I know how hard being a small business owner is too. Like I have a ton of tenants who are working 80 hours a week to try and, get people to come in their store and make 2 or 3 sales. And, if you're a tenant of mine, you're not a tenant, you're a friend. And I'm in their business and I'm trying to figure it out with them and to the detriment of mine sometimes. So I don't have these easy answers other than I believe in the story that I'm trying to tell, and if I can encourage one person to jump along with it and say, I'm going to ignore the politics, I'm going to ignore all the reasons I can't build a business here, and I'm just going to go, then one person one day, and we've made a difference after 10 years.
That's awesome. Over here.
So, first of all, appreciate the talk, it's been great. I'm new to the area, so I'm your target demographic. Is somebody
Don't listen to anyone here. Only listen to me.
Someone's got perspective, right? So when you talk about the fact that all these areas are close to each other, I'm saying, yeah, he's right. I'm used to being in a metropolitan area where it's 45 minutes to an hour and a half drive to go from the equivalent of Albany to Schenectady here to Troy. So I appreciate that. I'm loving the downtown Troy, actually a real hit to Troy. So I'm actually got a fresh perspective. What I wanted to hear more about, because I don't know you and I don't really know the story, is a little bit more of how you got from aid to the mayor, economic development, to where you are now. Like, how did you scale up? What were the early steps to go from just a random 25-year-old thinking I'm moving to Tampa to somebody who's now influential and kind of built some kind of business?
It doesn't make any sense. And it's something that I've had to work on telling the story because it can sound so easy that I sometimes put too many positive thoughts in people's heads who aren't ready to do it. A lot of it was a blind leap of faith and just, sure, I can figure it out. It made no sense to, I went to school for journalism, so to be a journalist and then go, congratulations, Rick. So to go from journalist to, I'm gonna go be the spokesperson of the mayor of Troy, and then get sick of that and just say, I'm gonna go do real estate and convince a guy to give me a 6-figure salary when I had never even looked at a pro forma. I had never had a mortgage in my life, and I was like, I can do this. That doesn't actually make sense. And then 2013, I started my company. I'd only been doing real estate for 3 years. And, very arrogantly just was like, oh, this is so easy. I'm just gonna go do this. So the benefits and the why it actually happened, not why I did it, but why it happened, was because people believed in me, and I really try to keep my word every time I tell someone I'm going to do something. I have investors, and sometimes projects don't work, and still pay them the returns at my personal loss, because that's what you should do. And I think I've been able to convince a bunch of people, and you know, a lot of this is privilege, and it's something that when I first heard the concept of white privilege, I kind of rejected because I was like, well, I've worked really hard for everything I've had in my life, and I have. Doesn't mean I also haven't been privileged. And so there were banks giving me loans when I was, you know, 34 years old and had just started my company. And I think that if I was an African-American woman at the same age, I would not have gotten that loan. And that is a very, I'm a more conservative economic, liberal political guy. I'm liberal on social issues, and conservative on economics. And so to hear the concept of white privilege, it can be an affront to somebody who has a big ego and wants to think that he did everything himself. So I have taken great advantage of the things that have been given to me, and now I feel like it's my duty to help just give back as much as I can emotionally handle.
Well, that's a good segue, actually, to my question about this, do the next good thing. So
Yeah.
this was, you know, giving $100 a day.
Yep.
And I think it was $1,000 on every 30th.
Yep.
Except February, maybe you did the 28th,
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
I didn't
And
think
you
of that
gave
when we were starting.
to basically for people to do something and pay it forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what did you get out of that experience, or what did you learn from that experience? Are there stories that stand out? I know there's probably a ton, but maybe can you grab a little bit of that?
Yeah, I think going into it, I did it because after the 2016 election, there was so much hatred everywhere, and it just drove me almost insane. Like, yeah, you might be right and you might be right, but neither of you are listening to each other, and we're never going to solve this because being right isn't what's most important. So I decided that I was just going to go out and meet random people with the hopes. I had this theory in my head that inherently all people are good, and that they have good in them. So I took my journalistic background, which was I love to write every single day. And I wanted to just go, you know, meet Tony in the street, and Tony would have no idea that I'm going to give him $100. And I would sit there and I would chat with him for 10 minutes, try to get his story. And then in the middle of this, Jack Carpenter from Two Buttons Deep is here. Would have failed flat on my face if it wasn't for Jack. So, you know, Jack was an emotional supporter, an actual worker. He would do stories himself. So the big takeaway was people are inherently good. And then over and over and over and over again, it was proven out that people are so good, and everyone has a story. I was in Denver this weekend, and we were sharing what I learned from this project with, there were 6,000 Jewish teenagers at this conference, Jewish leadership conference, and you know, sat down and we're talking with a couple hundred of them at a time. And the big story that sticks out is this woman that I met in downtown Schenectady at 5:30 in the morning. I had gone out to run. I would post all these stories at 8 a.m., so I would get up and write them before 8 a.m. And then post them on Facebook. And I met this woman, and I said to her, you know, can I bother you for a minute? She said, well, do you have a cigarette? And I said, I don't. And she said, well, do you have $1? And I said, I could give you $1 if you give me a little bit of your time. And she pauses and says, well, how about $2? So I said, sure, I can do that. And she said, well, walk with me. I'm going to the Salvation Army for breakfast. So she's got a suitcase pulling behind her. I'm out for like a jog walk, more walking than jogging. And, you know, we started talking, and I said, well, where did you spend the night last night? And she said, oh, I stayed on the street. I got out of jail at 11 o'clock. And I said, wow, you got out of jail at 11 o'clock. How long were you in there? Oh, I did about 4 months for forgery. And, you know, I forged my name on someone else's checks. And, you know, she started talking to me about how she had been a drug counselor and was trying to rehab people in her life. And her husband at the time got her into drugs. And she just collapsed, and her life went down the drain, and, you know, she had no teeth. She was, you know, completely down on her luck, had nothing, just gotten out of jail, had clearly done something wrong that, you know, in my opinion, everybody can be forgiven. And here I am walking to the Salvation Army with this woman thinking, what is my life? Like, and she said, so why are you talking to me? And I said, well, here's the story of my sister. You know, she passed away in April of 2016, and you know, I'm trying to keep her memory alive. She had a bucket list, and there are 5 core things on that bucket list that she did in her life, and you know, these are things that I'm trying to now live out in my life and implant into other people if I can. And she said, well, was it drugs that killed her? And I said, no. And she looks at me, and this is a woman who had just gotten out of jail, and her whole life had collapsed. She had nothing. She was walking to the Salvation Army for breakfast. And I said, no, my sister didn't die of drugs. And she looked at me and said, do you see how blessed I am? And I just started crying. And we sat there, and we just sat on the sidewalk, and I just talked with her for another half an hour and said, well, how can I help you? And she's like, oh, you can't help me. You did say you were going to give me $2. So I told her, there's a lot of hope in this story. I told her I didn't have $2, but I had 20. And I handed it to her, and then she starts crying because now she can't believe what's happening to her. And I said to her, what do you want to do? How can you change your life? Like, we're here this morning. How can I help you change your life? And she starts talking about what she wants to do. And this is a great story of life because I have no conclusion to this story. But I told her when she's done with her parole and she can leave, if she wants to move back to Atlanta, where her family is, that I would pay for her bus ticket and I'd give her $500 and she could start her new life.
Awesome.
And I gave her my card and I said, just find somebody who has a phone or find somebody who's on Facebook, and she has all my information. I have not heard from her, but if she were to call me today and say, like, I met you here and this is who I am, I'd be so excited to go help her. And when I started this thing, we started giving away money on the 30th of the month, and we had an incredible amount of people would jump in, strangers in this room who just were reading my stories every day, and they would jump in and they would give money. Street Soldiers is the one that pops into my head right away. Street Soldiers is an awesome group in Albany, Schenectady, Troy, and Saratoga, and they help homeless people. It's just a bunch of volunteers who show up on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night, and they all bring their own food, potluck, and pizza from Domino's, and clothes, and they give it out. And I went with Nicole one night, and I looked at Renee, who was running it, and I said, this is incredible. I'm going to raise $10,000 for you tomorrow. And put $1,000 of my own money in, and we got to $10,000 in like 12 hours. Just random strangers from around the Capital District, $50 at a time.
Wow.
And we raised $10,000 in like 24 hours because people are inherently good, and they want to, not only do they want to do good, but they want to support an underdog, and that's the basis of our wrapping this whole thing up. That's the basis of our philosophy. We're working in areas we're the underdog areas, Schenectady, Albany, and Troy. The reason I don't want them all to fight is because we're all the underdog. And if we team up and try to fight back against all of the negativity, then we can actually become the favorite and become a spot people want to go.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. We're done. I hate to say it. This is the fat, Tony, it's a career move, so make it very quick because we always promise to get out at 1 o'clock.
Great, 2 questions. Why Redburn, and what is your favorite tool or machine that your development company uses?
Why Redburn? Like, why do we merge, or why is it called Redburn?
Why the name? Quickly, very fast.
The two principals are Tom Rossi and John Blackburn, and Rossi in Italian means red, and obviously the burn in John Blackburn, Redburn.
Favorite tool?
The human mind.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So, but we always promise to get out at 1 o'clock, so we will be doing that. So thank you again so much, Jeff. You were awesome. He's not even feeling well today, but he keeps his commitments, as he said earlier. I didn't know you were not feeling well. Happy to announce our next speaker is the man, the myth, the legend, Tony Civitella. That's March 21st. You can register. It's live now, so please do that. And I want to thank again Richard Lynn and Jack Carpenter for videotaping and live streaming this. And again, please leave your name tags on the desk on the way out. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.